Hearing of Board of Education, June 25, 2024. Thanks everyone for being here. We'll get right into it. We'll all rise and join me in the first.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Ms. Stewart, do you mind doing our roll call, please?
Absolutely.
President
Here.
Vice President McIntyre. Here. Treasurer Campbell-Boyd. Here. Trustee Mazurek, not here yet. Trustee Meyer. Here. Trustee Prescott, not here yet. And Secretary Stewart, here.
All right, thank you so much. That brings us to the adoption of our agenda, and I will turn it over to our Vice President, Ms. McIntyre, please.
Hi, I'd like to bring forth motion 127 that the agenda be adopted as presented. Support.
All right, so we have a motion properly presented by Ms. McIntyre and supported by Ms. Stewart. Any discussion on our agenda before we vote? Looks good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda passes. That brings us to our consent resolutions. Again, I'll hand it over to our Vice President, please.
Okay, I'd like to bring forth motion 128 that the board accept the consent agenda items for approval as presented. I guess that's it. Support.
All right. We have a motion properly presented by Ms. McIntyre and supported by Ms. Meyer. Any discussion on our consent resolutions tonight? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our consent resolutions passed. Thank you for that. And that brings us to our highlight of the evening, our budget hearing, number 6 on our agenda. Turn it over to Mr. Zoff, I believe.
Thank you. Okay, we'll get right into it. Unfortunately, I think this budget is probably a little bit of wishful thinking based on what we've just heard a bit ago, but we'll go through it anyway, and I'll kind of point out where I think there might be a change coming up in subsequent budgets if what we're hearing is going to stay. Anyway, let's start with our millage rates for next year. So our non-homestead is going to remain at 18 mills. There was a reduction due to Headley. We have what is something called a Headley hedge, which means that some extra millage that voters have approved previously, but we can statutorily only levy up to 18 mills. So the hedge was reduced a little bit due to Headley, but nevertheless, it's not impacting us at all because we do have a hedge that we're going to use. I do want to mention one thing, that this operating millage, which generates about $10 million for us annually, that operating millage will expire on December 31st, 2026. So for future planning purposes, that's something we'll have to just kind of keep on our radar in terms of scheduling. And then there are 6 mills assessed on commercial personal property. And those levies are on what is called non-primary residence exemption, meaning non-homestead properties only. All properties receive a levy of 6 mills for the state education tax. Just for point of clarification for anybody who might be seeing this, that 6 mills does not come directly to the school district. It goes into the state and it goes into the school aid fund from which we get a foundation allowance. So just wanted to make that point. Our enhancement millage, that also was reduced due to a Headley rollback. It's going to be levied at 1.9812 mills. You'll hear in the regular board meeting for the proposal to basically renew that millage. The board will be asked to approve a resolution, and that's the millage levy. That's the rate that was in the resolution or is in the resolution. Our debt mills remains at 3.4, which is what we told the community when we went forward to request or ask them to vote on bond 2023. So that is unchanged from last year. And our sinking fund is reduced slightly, again, due to a Headley rollback at 0.9357.
And Mike, when is the next opportunity to go for sinking fund? What year was that, 25?
That one is in 25, December 31st, 2025. So that does expire next year, at the end of next calendar year. The next slide, slide 4, basically, as I mentioned, it just kind of shows the different taxing entities that we have. We actually have 7 taxing entities in the district. We span 3 counties, and we generate locally about $10.3 million of non-pre-property and about $140,000 of commercial personal property. I have assumed an increase in taxable values of about 5% in developing this budget from the 2023 tax year. The next slide basically shows our debt service requirements for the 2024 tax year. You can see that we will be, our principal payments about $7.5 million and about $6.4 million of interest. And it shows the different maturities that are out there. In 2026 will be the next, series that will be fully paid off, and that'll be in 2026, and that's the 2018 back from bond 2017. That would be Series 1. Okay, so that's the millage and the operating revenue. The next few slides talks about state aid and some of our one-time supplemental revenue. This slide, at the time when I pulled this together, what we had available was the House budget proposal, the Senate, as well as the governor's earlier budget proposal. Since the governor's proposal had at that time included $240 per pupil increase, and that was kind of in the middle of the 3 budget proposals. I used that in developing the budget. So I'm budgeting a $240 per pupil increase, again, based on the governor's budget recommendation earlier this calendar year. This next slide shows some of the categoricals. Again, this really gets into the hard part of trying to develop a budget without having a state budget available, because we don't know exactly how some of the categoricals, are they going to continue? Were they one time? We just don't know. I've circled a couple of the larger ones. For example, the enrollment stabilization that we received this year, which was almost $500,000. Not sure if that's going to continue into next year. Our mental health grant, $1.5 million. That's the Section 31 AA grant. Don't know how that's going to be impacted with this next year's school aid bill. And then district transportation, another $400,000. So there's some higher cost or higher revenue categorical, so we just don't know if they're going to continue or not. But we should, from what I'm hearing and what we just learned about a half hour ago, we might get a school aid bill as early as tomorrow. So we'll see. The next slide is the one-time supplemental revenue. And this is just a recap of all the monies we've received from COVID funding. And in total, it's about $14.2 million. You can see in 2024, I'm using $500,000. We actually have $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million of Section 11T available. We're looking at other ways we could possibly spend that, but from a conservative standpoint, I said I've been pretty confident we'll at least spend $500,000. And then in conjunction with the Office of Instruction and the Office of Special Services, we're looking at all opportunities to kind of spend that remainder of the 11T that's available. The next section talks a little bit about enrollment. We do use an outside consultant, Stanford, to do our enrollment projections for us. They do a few different scenarios, which they call high, most likely, and low. You can see what they Some of this, to a large degree, it's statistical analysis that they go and use in developing their projections. The box on the far right that I've kind of inserted in there, what I've kind of done is that I've taken a looking at their most likely. It's about 66-40 is where they're kind of saying, and this is Gen Ed. I'm actually incorporating it. I'm using a few more. Going to use 66-70 for the fall enrollment. Again, primarily because of the Young 5 program. I'm hoping we're going to get incremental enrollment overall from that. So I'm going a little higher than their most likely projection. So I'm using 66-70 for the fall number. And then once you have the fall number on slide 12, I actually need to then develop what is called a blended enrollment, because the overall budget is based on a blended enrollment, which is within the same calendar year. It's 10% of the spring count and then 90% of the fall count. So we know what spring was. We're at 67-77 Gen Ed in the spring count, which is the last box that you see there. And then like I said, I'm budgeting 66-70. So when you do the blend, it comes to 66-80 versus the 67-70 the year before. And that's the 90 reduction that you're going to see shortly. For fall, that's just it in graphical form. It's 66-70, kind of see where we're at. The next slide is enrollment trend by grade level. We know that this year was really kind of a surprise, even for our forecasting consultant, with our enrollment in the kindergarten cohort. You know, we brought in 361 students, but we had a pretty high graduating class. So hopefully, we're kind of budgeting 407, almost like a return to kind of a normal. And it's a kind of a blend kindergarten Young 5 number. I'm using 407. And that's, you can see how the rest of it falls. Anyway, we did have a large class that matriculated this past year. So hopefully we can have a stronger kindergarten cohort in the fall, kindergarten/Young 5. Some other budget assumptions. Again, when I did this, we still are in negotiations. So we just kind of put a kind of a 4% average across all groups, not targeting any particular group. Total district, we're looking at about, I use 4%. I am including the bonus trigger that's been in play for a number of years now. I'm pretty sure we're going to hit our 18% fund balance, so that's the upper end of the fund balance bonus payment that would be paid in December of this year. On the benefit side, one of the things that's going to be hard for all staff is the fact that our hard cap increase, which comes from the state, went up only 0.2%. So from a district standpoint, our healthcare costs are going up minimally. But obviously we all know healthcare costs are really rising outside. And so that's going to be a heavier lift for all of our staff for medical next year. Retirement, I just used 1% for the normal rate. And again, not knowing where UAAL that whole discussion was going to be. And unfortunately, it looks like it's not kind of falling in our favor right now. I think we'll hear more tomorrow. But it looks like we may get a 1-year break in the UAAL payment. Looks like it might be reduced. I mentioned right now, I think previously to the board, that we are statutorily capped at 20.9% for UAAL. I'm understanding from what I'm kind of reading here, it looks like it might go down by 6 percentage points next year. But the trade-off, it looks like it's going to be, there might not be a foundation allowance increase.
And so I emailed that recent communication that came at 5:08 to each of you. It's in your emails. Board of Education.
So again, I mean, bottom line to all this is this budget, absent, having a state school aid bill is really kind of a lot of, I think just based the time with what we knew. So, and it's going to definitely have to be amended, probably right after count day in the fall. Operations, I kind of basically assumed 3% economics. And then custodial, we talked about, I think last time when the board approved the extension for GRBS, that we made a change with some of their washing protocols that will generate some savings for us. So trying to get some savings in the non-personnel areas.
Right.
In terms of staffing, what was built into this budget is the 4 young 5 teachers, 1 math coach, 1 technology coach. We do have a reduction of 2 middle school teachers. Again, that's just simply due to enrollment, no programmatic change or anything like that. And then we did have a retirement, a media specialist who retired, and that position won't be, actually, I think we're going to use that slot for one of the coaches. So that position won't be filled.
Can I ask a question? Just so I'm clear, is this a net gain for teachers, for young 5 teachers? Is that a net increase in the total number of staff?
What's
Or
that?
is that a swap for retirement? Is that new? Those are new positions?
I'm not sure. I'm going to let
I don't
Brian
know.
answer that one.
That would be an increase in staff.
Increase in staff, thank you very much.
But just, can I follow up to make sure I understand? So one thing that's true is every year when we lose our wonderful retirees, and I remember it was like over 400 years of experience, they tend to be at the top of the pay scale,
Right.
and then other people who are maybe higher.
Earlier in their
Right.
careers.
Like other hires, maybe some of these people or others tend to not be. Are those kinds of assumptions priced into?
Yes,
your
yeah, they are, Sarah. We will get to the, in a second,
Good-
when you see the
Good
changes.
question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good point. This next section talks about the changes there are changes from this year's final budget. So looking at, on the revenue side, the big change obviously is I had budgeted the increase in the foundation allowance. That $240 per pupil would have given us $1.6 million. So it sounds like that might not be in play, but for this budget purpose, it is. I have assumed, I don't want to trip through all of these. You can pretty much read it, but ESSER funding is the next big reduction of about $2.5 million. This year, we took about $3 million in ESSER Section 11T money in this year's budget. And like I said, I'm looking at about $500,000 next year. But in total, it looks like a revenue decline of about 1.7 million. On the cost side, again, the 4% that we were talking about, contractual wages and salaries, about $2.5 million. And again, that's total district-wide. One thing I wanted to point out, in this budget, I have a provision for basically a retention bonus that at one time, in discussion with some of our groups, we had talked about paying a retention bonus this year. With the time that I needed to put this together, we still had some bargaining sessions that were still scheduled. And what I didn't want to do was remove at the time the bonus, and then thinking perhaps that maybe we might get a breakthrough and be able to get something done by June 30th and paid. So I didn't want to leave my budget not having it, but in full, just to let the board know that there is $1,075,000 that is not going to be spent this year. So that is a bonus that perhaps as we get deeper into negotiations, and perhaps we may land there, but it won't be this year, it'll be next year.
So you talked about the 4% that you budgeted. That's in addition to this million.
Right. So what you're seeing here, it's a reduction in 24-25 because I had it in 23-24. So as a change, it's coming out. So it's not in here. We may land at a bonus, but that's to be negotiated.
And we don't have to do a budget amendment to finalize that.
Well, we'll have a final budget amendment that, yes, that will actually reduce the $1 million. So you're going to see in the 23-24 final budget amendment, you will see that bonus coming out.
And is that the July meeting?
Pardon me?
When will that happen?
The final amendment?
Yeah.
Tonight.
Oh, I didn't see it in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay.
Okay,
That's
thank
right.
you.
Yep.
I thought there was gonna be a final.
Yeah. Final.
Nothing's ever final.
Final.
These days.
So hopefully, I know that's a bit confusing, but anyway, so it was in 23-24. It's not going to
This is
be.
a timing issue more, right? We had it this year, it's probably not gonna happen by June 30th, which
Right.
means it's just going to shift it from one year to another.
Yeah, if we land there with a bonus, but keep in mind, it's not, that bonus payment is not in this budget, so, for 24-25.
Right, okay.
Okay. This is the next item, Sarah, that you asked about, the attrition savings. So we have about 10%, 10 staff members that I'm generating I just estimated about $30,000 a replacement, a one-for-one replacement. So about $412,000 of savings. The staffing adjustments come in at about $316,000. And then, again, MIPSers, it looks like we're actually not going to have an increase. We're going to see a reduction. So we'll learn a little bit more about that, and I think tomorrow. On the non-personnel side, you're going to see purchase services up a little bit. Basically, some economics, nothing significant. Our contracted services, Durham and GRBS, are kind of offsetting one another. We're going to have some restorative practice expenditures next year for Section 31AA, a little less than probably what we had this year, so that you'll see a little reduction there. On the supply and utility side, we bought with Section 11T. This year we bought some library books, so that was kind of a one-time spend. We're not going to repeat that. So on the supply utility side, you see that cost reduction for 24-25. And then on the other section, probably the big items, this year we accomplished a major PA system upgrade in all of our buildings, which was a big accomplishment. And thank Andrew and Steve for that. So that reduction, we won't have that cost in 24-25, but there's some items in, you're going to see a provision for a wellness grant. So Section 31AA, all the Section 31AA money that was spent this year was rolled over from last year, as was the Section 97, the safety grant. So those two combined was about $1.5 million this year, and we were able to basically use all of last year's allocation for those items, meaning the allocation we received this year, which was about $1.5 million, again, I'm able to use for 24-25. So we don't have all definitive plans on how to spend it, but I wanted to put that revenue in the budget. And in order to put the revenue in the budget, I have to put some corresponding cost, because I can't supplant with that particular grant. So I can't just put revenue in and not put some cost in there that it's going to be used on. I don't have, so you're going to see, I've got a provision in there for a wellness grant. I have no idea how we're going to spend it, but we'll come back to the board with a plan after we have a proposal that you can review, and we can see how we want to use that money. So we have until September 30th, 2025 to spend the $1.5 million that we received last year. So this year we can spend about 1.5 million. Some safety upgrades, we know we're going to use some of that money for that, and some sensory spaces, I have an allocation for that. So anyway, and then the very last thing is RISA has given us some one-time funding about last year they gave us some money, and this year they gave us some additional money, and we're using it to upgrade the HVAC system at Cook. That's one of the things that we're using it on. And then, so that's what this is in here. You're going to see it. It's on the revenue side too. So I'm taking revenue that's coming from RISA, but yeah, there's an offsetting cost. So when you roll these changes together, it looks like in right about the middle column, we'll have total revenue about $98.7 million, total expenditures about 103.1. And so that's about a $4.4 million drawdown in fund balance. So we'll be roughly about 25% at the end of next year. And again, we'll see how, what the final school aid bill, where it comes in, what it really does to us. And in October-ish, we'll do a budget amendment for 24-25. But for now,
When will we get the final school aid number?
I was thinking, like, even this week.
Yeah, what came out this afternoon, they're either going to play a game and try to come back with something real, because this is absurd, or they're going to drag us to the fall. So unfortunately, we're going to be in a kind of a waiting pattern on that, but this
Why didn't
is.
they wait till September? I mean, when it was more split.
Yep.
Yep.
It's crazy, or August.
So any information I get, I'll make sure that it gets out to the board. This is the same budget. The earlier slide was what we call by object, and this is by function. This basically says that we spend 74.5% on student instruction. So we try to, obviously, that's where we want our resources to go. The next slide is basically our cost structure. And you can see that in the box there, I just pointed out that between salaries and wages and benefits, we're about 82% of our budget is in those areas. We don't want it to get overall, we don't want to get any higher, because quite frankly, you need to be able to have, you got a critical mass of other things besides salaries and benefits to run the district. So, but we'll continue to look for opportunities on how we can reduce some of these other costs. So, going into next year. This next slide is just some of our other funds.
Real quick question.
Sure.
So going back to that previous one, you said 82% is like the highest you would want. What's your comfortable number? If 82% is like, whoa.
Well, I think that's districts that have, to answer that, IDEX, we use a service that basically kind of has historical information among all school districts over time. IDEX has indicated, it's not me, IDEX, has said that districts that are in above that as a percentage, they're really kind of gravitating toward, like, over time, not just in 1 year, they would be more characteristic of a deficit district. So to get anything more than 82%, it's something we don't want to do. I mean, we can do this for 1 year, but over time, it's not sustainable unless you get some other major costs out of the system.
If you look
non-personnel.
at the previous 5 years, I mean, they tend to run 78 point something, 79. I mean,
That's a little more
get over
comfortable.
80s and you're starting to drive yourself down.
Yeah.
So we would want to get back to that 78 plus range to be into a balanced budget kind of situation.
So if you look at what else we have paid for, that's why it's so stressful, because like we spend, what, 9.5% on,
Yeah, right,
on like operations and maintenance.
yeah.
So once you're at 82 plus 9%, you don't have a lot to work with.
Okay, this slide is basically some of our other budgets at food service, early child, and special ed. Food service, we're doing pretty well. We actually have, there's a cap on how much fund balance we can retain in food service. And with the Michigan Meals Program this school year, we're projecting to add some additional fund balance. So we're obviously trying to see what we can do there in terms of, how we can cost effectively, get within that range for permissible
I
fund
remember
balance.
we've done this in the past, where we've come up against the maximum limit, so, we had an old delivery van some years ago, or a while ago, we purchased a new delivery van to replace an old one, so we just may have to do some upgrades, and since there's
Yeah.
some needs at like
Meats.
that maybe where you apply some of the stuff, like for the whole food services area, could use some love, and
Yeah.
that's what we'll apply it.
Yeah, and actually, the other thing too, with the Meads Mill project, one of the things that we're targeting is to use some of our food service fund balance to help with that project, because there's a lot of, there's the kitchen
Yeah,
renovation,
whole kitchen's a lot.
and it's gonna be all
food services.
redone. So that will alleviate some of the burden on our bond funding. So if we can use this, and we will, so. Early childhood's doing well, special ed, we keep an eye on that. The next slide is just student activities, the sinking fund, and our public improvement fund. We haven't done any activity there. So that takes us to watch points. Again, these are just mine. The first one, like, again, when I did this, we didn't know where we were headed with UAAL. So we were hoping that we would get an additional $500 per pupil, or at least a portion thereof. And it looks like that's not going to work out, but it looks like we may get some reduction in our required UAAL contributions for next year on a one-time basis. Investment income, sorry. We expect, I'm expected, I think a lot of people expected this year we would start to see interest rates fall a little bit, and they haven't yet. And latest thing I heard this morning, it's probably not going to happen before the election. But it's kind of been a silent, nice revenue source the last couple of years. This year, I'm budgeting 1.6 million. I think the Fed is going to probably have a cut, start to cut maybe after the election. They're still thinking that maybe one cut this calendar year. And
That's what all the talk is,
Yeah.
one cut, but the issue is the timing.
right,
Stay out of the politics game, it probably means they're not gonna the Fed's gonna stay out of the election cycle, so if it does, it'll be very late in the year.
right. Yeah. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on that. Enrollment. One thing, we're on a very positive note, launching the Young Five program this year, or next year in 24-25, to attract some of our early learners, and hopefully they stay with us through, the subsequent 12 years. So that was great to see us launching a Young Five program, and looks like we've got 4 classrooms that should be very good. The other thing we're trying to do, I think, kind of a community-wide outreach. This has been going on, but I think there's some additional marketing and communication items coming up, and going to try to reach out to the whole community. I think we do a good job internally, to talking among parents and among community. But in terms of just getting outreach, I think there's some things that are being planned that I think will be helpful. We already talked about the revenue cliff. We know we're going to lose about $2.5 million this year. And then the enhancement millage that is going for renewal in November. That generates about $360 a pupil for us, even though, again, we're a kind of a donor district, but we'll talk more about that at the regular board meeting. The last slide there is just, I guess, in terms of fund balance, we just need to kind of monitor where we're at and somehow regulate it. We know that there's opportunity to reduce it somewhat, and it will be reduced, I think, as we, as we move forward. But this, again, depending upon where school funding goes, this gives us some time to thoughtfully approach things on how we want to, structure our costs. That we don't have to do any knee-jerk reactions or anything like that. That unfortunately some districts have had to go through or are going through. So this is just a slide of our fund balance as a percentage of revenue. You can see it's been, pretty steady and declining just a tad over the last, couple of years. So again, I think we're going to learn a whole lot more over the next couple of days on where the school aid bill is really going to take us for next year. Hopefully we get some better understanding about categoricals, because there's a lot of hidden money in there. And then we'll see where we are in terms of the UAL and what that impact will be to us, and not having that, having the reduction of 6%, which should help. Although not getting a foundation allowance increase is not.
Mike, I didn't, obviously I was at work, so I didn't get a chance to read that, to know what's going on.
So
Is internal politics going on, gamesmanship, or I mean,
it
clearly
seems
we never expected to get a 500, and it was generally accepted. A lot of people said, oh no, we're gonna get lots more money, and we said, we know it's gonna be a lot smaller, but 0 is well beyond anybody's expectation. So is this just a politics game they're playing?
I think actually RJ just left. It was Matt Colzar who was calling him.
Okay.
So I think there's some discussion going on clearly in Lansing, and
I guess my question would be,
I think
well, this will probably lead into that, but our next budget hearing, or not hearing, update would be in October, I thought you said.
Yeah,
Put
right.
a pin in that. We could know tomorrow, a week, September,
Yeah, I just
what our
talked,
final
yeah,
allowances.
that was Matt. And he was just calling to apologize. He said this all came from above. They could tie bar the Senate 9/11 with it tomorrow to make it right. And I just said to him, like, any district negotiating contracts now, their union's either going to sit until the fall, which is going to harm things and people. Luckily, we have really smart HR people, and I don't know if there's a way kind of around that, but his feeling is like, this came from way above, and the person who's in that position way above has not returned any communication or anything to people today about
Can you
this.
say what this is? Because I'm not sure what.
Yeah, so at 5:08, what happens in Lansing today, Sarah, in the MIPSers piece, that's 7%. What we were hoping for was Mike's projections, which is everybody's, what was it, what was the number,
240.
240, that we were going to add an additional 516 per student on that because of the money that was taken out of our pockets. Well, makes logical sense, no tax increase, win politically and so on, but there are at least 2 projects that people very high up want to happen. And today, what they returned to us was a 0 increase on our budget, but they're going to act like they're going to give us some money from the MIPSers aspect. So that's what we're referencing right now in that call I just needed to take, was Representative Colzar was on his way back, kind of giving me some more details on it. So there's a special meeting tonight for Wayne County superintendents that I'll get on and try to figure out what's going on. But like, I feel horrible for Mike because he's sitting here and you can hear it in his voice. Like, this is all this preparation he did was based on assumptions that every other year were fine. And now gamesmanship.
So this that's being handed down, the latest that isn't gonna budge
Correct.
until September, just if I'm understanding.
You're
if I'm
right.
understanding.
Yep.
What he's saying is not budging for now is a 0% increase, but then this whole business with the UAL.
Yeah. So right now, so I sent this to all your emails, but it's a zero foundation
Oh,
increase,
thank
reduce
you.
OPEB rate one time by 5.7, which is just kabuki theater. 25 million total, they're cutting our 31 AA by 275 million is what they're saying. The 180 million reimbursement, kabuki theater. I'm sorry, I'm just really angry right now. 57 million in one-time payments to PSAs. I'm furious about that because all that money they're taking, not one penny came from any public school academy or charter school. So the charters are getting $57 million from us that they didn't pay a penny into debt. And then this bottom line of that 85 million to GSRP is part, in my opinion, is part of kind of the governor's long game of getting preschool through there. So,
What does GSRP stand for?
great start.
Readiness
Readiness program.
So they pay
not
down,
our-
they pay down the UA,
janitorial.
they pay down the
For a year.
retirement by $250 million.
For a year, and so
For 1 year.
there's two, there's like a med fund and a regular fund. So the med fund is actually funded 140%. So people in public education, Karen, myself, we've all been paying more than needed into this for years. So hits it, and we're like, well, wait a second, if we're funded at 140%, like, that money should then go back to public schools who have paid into it, still leave it at 100, which would have resulted in an additional $516 per student here.
Right, that's.
It seemed like a no-brainer. It's no tax increase, nothing like that. Districts like Ann Arbor, Wayne Westland, who are obviously in trouble. So what we're all kind of trying to reel from literally 20 minutes before this presentation was seeing numbers that at least Mike and I would have never expected to see come back to us after today.
Well, I mean, I would, in a split environment, these gamesmanship are, that's to be expected,
Sure.
right, than that. But when you're not in a split environment,
She's running for president.
Yep. In my opinion, Jim, is that that new majority doesn't know how to lead. And I mean that respectfully. But what I've seen in the past year and a half is Keystone Cops. I don't know who's talking to who. What's the old Abbott and Costello skit? Who's on first? What's on second? No, what's on, like,
I mean, this is like a crime when you control every piece of government and you
and I doubt you ever would think I would,
get it done.
and I doubt you would ever think I would say this, but you're 100% right.
I'm baffled. I've experienced this when we had splits and you know that, but when there's no splits, how can you?
Especially such a softball like this. I mean, this was a pitch lobbed right down the middle that was a win. And they found a way to make it, I mean, I'll tell you, the superintendents and just every professional education group in the state are probably meeting tonight. I can't tell you what happened,
So I just.
other than what Sarah just said, which I think is
To dumb
right.
it down, they're saying that the MISPERS is in lieu of per pupil foundation,
Mhm.
and they're using that as an opportunity to say, oh, we are giving you money, and then they're
Mhm.
using that as a reason to give the PSAs money because they're saying, well, the public schools are getting this money
Yeah.
through this reduction,
Yeah.
and here's money
That's not
for the
dumb. It's kind of
PSAs.
like Charlie going into your purse, or you going into Charlie's purse, taking out $60, and she says, "Ma, can I have $60 to go out tonight?" And you're like, "Sure, honey." And you give her $60, and she goes out the door not realizing that the money you gave her was her money anyway. It's exactly what they just did to us today. And then we have to act thankful for it. Oh,
Well, I
gee,
guess
Ma,
the other
thanks.
thing that really I find is the fact that they saying that public school employees are only giving it 1 year that you don't have to pay your 3%.
So there's no
Yeah.
guarantee about it going
There's
in.
no guarantee.
Well,
And
what
that,
you can say later is I reduced my pension in my state, my pension obligation, I paid it down by $250 million.
Right, this is all about talking points in politics and future positions.
And on the backs of our kids and our communities.
Didn't you say that to the extent that does get paid down, that does help us some on our budget?
Yeah, I mean, if we don't have to pay to the 20% next year of our, UAL, if it's 6 percentage points down, that just says, I can use that money next year, because it's 1 year, I can use that money somewhere else. but it's 1 year. And that's why, when you go and you negotiate contracts, you can't, it's hard to go to the table and negotiate a 2-year deal even. That's built into your cost structure. If what you're getting is something that's a one-time, and you don't know how it's gonna.
And just to add a little bit, and this could just be, adding to the silliness, but if the governor is gonna give 3% back to our employees, I'm gonna file a ULP charge and say that you are now negotiating on my behalf, and you can't do that.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
What's really baffling to me, I mean, it just,
I'm disgusted.
yeah, for me, I mean, it seems like
I'll fund that lawsuit.
Let's roll, baby.
This is beyond my ability to,
I know, it's hard, yes.
I'm usually pretty good at understanding the political game, but this one is beyond me.
Okay, so the upshot is, you were giving us your best shot. This is what it is.
Yeah.
And your best is usually.
So 25% was the end?
So, yeah, the 25% is the ending, yeah. What baffles me about this is that regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, I think everybody agrees one of the problems in the state right now is basically population. We don't have population growth. Where we're at, what's the most important thing that can build have people, encourage people to move, to stay in the state? It's a strong education system. And I don't know how a SOAR program is going to accomplish what a strong education
Feedback I've had in the
system
past week
would provide.
This is that corporate welfare program. When I say we, the ed establishment pointed out very clearly that was not a good investment. And the people who are for that program want to build train tracks from Detroit to Traverse City, lovely. But as far as a full benefit, they were upset of how strong our language was because we needed to be. Like, this is our kids. I was saying to somebody before they came in, my early teaching career, I was in Ithaca, Michigan, which is mid-Michigan. It's the largest employer in the city. Everybody's there on a Friday night. And I said, why wouldn't you want to inject capital into every community in the state of Michigan, especially small towns where those folks, the custodians, the bus drivers, are going to spend money at the supermarket, the gas station, the restaurant. Like, there is another benefit that can come from that type of capital injection. And it's really coming from, you don't have to raise taxes at all, rare, right? And I think what you said earlier, I'm upset and maybe a little bit on the more cynical side of things, but I think you're 100% right. I think that this was about long-term ambition.
Well, you just said it came from the top. I mean.
Yep, long-term ambition.
It's not wrong to want to pay. We could call Matt Welk and tell him we're happy to announce that she's going to pay down $250,000 and maybe he'll vote for her now. You always wanted that, right? Pay it down, pension liability and something.
Well, and I think the pension fund will be fully funded by 2038? Yep. It's on track to be. So it's kind of like tantamount to your house needs a roof, but you decided rather than put a new roof on it, you decided to pay down your mortgage, so your mortgage is going to be done 5 years earlier. But in the meantime, your basement's flooded and all your furniture's ruined. But gosh, 5 years earlier, your house is going to be paid off. It's just, I am befuddled, to say the least. And if Mike's befuddled, well, there's something. Jim's befuddled. Here we go. Like, we're all confused.
All right, well, anything else on our initial budget? Thank you, Mike, for the presentation.
Thanks, Michael.
Team. Excellent.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Well, I just would ask, I mean, I'm sure it's true, we're not have another meeting scheduled to the middle of next month, but any updates or any information?
Yeah, I'll funnel you guys through via email, whatever I get, like I just did, like on that part of it and things of that nature.
Okay.
All right, well, that brings us to the public hearing portion of our evening. Anything from the public here tonight? Going once, going twice? All right, that brings us to number 8. Any added agenda items, Ms. Irving, or anyone else? All right. That brings us to our, I suppose, first of our only opportunity for public comment tonight. Outside of the hearing, going once, going twice. Any other business? We'll adjourn at 6:20, I believe it is, 6:21. And come back at 6:30. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.